And the tractor has stopped driving around next door, so I will try to squeeze in one more today. I don't know if you heard that, but it was loud in my ears, but I don't think it came out too bad on the video for chapter 18. This is Michael M. Middleton reading from my allegorical fiction novel, The Great Deep. And I will let you pause, and if this is the first video you're in across, get a preview of the contents on the back. All sales from this and all of my books, I believe I have 20 out right now, benefit Youth with a Mission right here, Faith Harvest Helpers. This is an old work shirt I have on today. It's cool and it's rather warm outside. So I'll leave links in the description of the video about where you can find all of my books in one location. They're available just about anywhere you want to look for books online, but I tell most everybody Amazon because that's the easiest place that everybody knows about. But they are available at Borders and Books A Million and just about any other place you can find books online as well. This will be chapter 19 of The Great Deep, and we will continue on. William's alarm clock woke him at 5:30 the next morning. Although he usually didn't set his alarm during summer vacation, this was one of those special occasions when he had. He wanted to be sure to be up early enough to see his sister Leslie off as she returned home to Los Angeles. Awkward, sleepy fingers required nearly half a minute to locate and turn off the alarm. William yawned and shook his head, his face contorting into what would, under other circumstances, have been a terrifying grimace. He then wrinkled his brow, stretching his eyes open as far as they would go. Another yawn, and he slid his legs out from under the covers and stood up. After completing his daily business in the bathroom, he returned to the bedroom and got dressed. Planning on returning to the Ankara village later that day, he set aside the new clothes he'd received for his birthday and slid on an older pair of jeans and a t-shirt instead. Though he was usually pretty casual in his choice of attire, dressing in whatever his fingers found first, he knew that his mother would have a fit if he headed out to the cave in his brand new clothes. He knew that she would want him to save them for school and church. After he finished getting dressed, William paced off to the kitchen, where Mary was busy cooking an early breakfast for Leslie. "Good morning, Grandma," he greeted Mary as he entered the kitchen. "Is Leslie up yet?" "She'll be back any second," Mary replied. "She's just took her suitcase out to the car. You want some breakfast while I'm at it?" No thanks," William replied. "I'm not that hungry just yet. I'll make some toast or something after I collect the eggs." Mary finished preparing Leslie's breakfast and carried it out to the dining room table just as Leslie returned. "Thanks, Granny," she said. "You're terrific." Then, turning to William, she said, "Well, good morning, little spud." "Hey there, slug," William replied. "You taking off soon?" As Leslie took a seat and began eating, she replied, "Yep, as soon as I finish eating. Of course, I gotta say goodbye to Mom and Dad first." "Have you decided which way you're heading home yet?" William inquired. "Are you going up north or south?" "Well," Leslie replied, "I was really into the idea of heading south and taking a little detour to see Tombstone, but that just put me too far out of the way. I'd have to drive a good part of the night to make up the time, so I'll just head north and swing by the Grand Canyon on the way back. Maybe the next time I'm out this way I can head down and spend the day at Tombstone." "That'd be great," William replied. "I hear you've got some pretty cool Old West shows there. Gunfights in the streets and everything." "Well, Dad told me last night that he was taking you camping somewhere," Leslie inquired. "Yeah, in a couple of weeks," William replied. "He said it's someplace he used to go to out west of here, in the White Mountains." As William and Leslie talked, the aroma of coffee brewing made its way from the kitchen counter through the dining room and into the front room of the house. It then slithered up the stairs and into Jacob and Teresa's bedroom. Stirring from a sound sleep, Jacob stretched and sat up. Then, hearing the faint voices from downstairs, he reached over and shook his wife's shoulder. Wake up, honey. It sounds like Leslie's getting ready to take off. Leslie had just finished her breakfast as Jacob and Teresa came plodding down the stairs. Good morning, sweetie, Teresa began sleepily. Are you running out on us? Yeah, I think I've got to get everything together, Leslie replied. I love you guys. I'll make it back again, maybe around the holidays. The family made their way out to the front lawn, saying their goodbyes as Leslie slid behind the steering wheel of her car. As she pulled away waving, they lingered for several moments, watching as a cloud of dust pursued her into the distance. As the car crested a small rise in the road, disappearing over the far side, they turned again to the house. After William collected the eggs, he made himself breakfast. When he had finished eating and setting his dishes in the sink, he returned to his room. Pulling his backpack from the closet, he searched his belongings for some sort of a gift that he could take with him to the Ankara village. Considering a number of options, he finally settled on an old set of Lincoln logs. They can build all kinds of neat stuff with these, he thought, as he stuffed them into his backpack. He then spied a set of pickup sticks and put them in as well. Lastly, he added a few small toy cars to the backpack, thinking that the Ankara children might enjoy playing with them. Satisfied, he picked the backpack up and headed for the kitchen. Searching through the refrigerator, he selected an apple and a few carrots. He stuffed these into his backpack in case he got hungry before returning home for lunch. Remembering that he had left his bike in front of the house the last time he had ridden it, he went outside by the way of the front door. Strapping on his backpack, William mounted his bike and took off towards the familiar trail that led out to the cave. The morning was clear and unusually crisp for early August. A few high feathery clouds graced a sky that was otherwise as blue as the Caribbean. Scores of grasshoppers leapt out of the path of William's bike as he pedaled across the pasture. Several of these took flight upon leaping into the air. Wow, grasshoppers got the wings already, he thought. Fall must be coming real early this year. After making his way across the pasture and over the distant hill, William parked his bike a short distance from the cave. He paced over to the opening and made his way down the slope. Walking over the far left corner of the cave, he pulled the couch forward a few inches and slid his makeshift wall out of the way of the opening that led down to the Ankara village. As he did, a distant sound caught his ear. They're singing again, he thought. They sure do sing a lot. As William stood there listening for a moment, he noticed that there was something different in the tone of the music than what he'd heard before. Although they sang in their native language and the voices were still quite distant, William thought he could still feel something very distinctive in the song. There was a sadness to it, and a sense of desperation. Retrieving his rope from where he had tossed it aside before, he tied it off to one of the heavy wooden legs of the couch. He then gathered the rest of the rope into a loose bundle and tossed it through the opening in the cave wall. After dropping his backpack through as well, he climbed up onto the back of the couch and took hold of the rope. Swinging first one leg through the opening and then the other, he cautiously lowered himself down into the darkness. Locating his backpack by touch, he unzipped it and inserted a hand. There it is, he thought, locating the towel that he had wrapped his flashlight in to pat it. Unwrapping the towel, he retrieved the flashlight and flicked it on. It shone brightly for a second or two before languishing to a deep amber. It then extinguished completely. William then realized that he had never gotten around to changing the batteries after his first trip out to the village. Pausing for several minutes, he considered his options. Remembering the candles stored in the fort, he climbed back up the rope and retrieved several, along with a dozen or so matches. He stuffed these into his pocket and climbed slowly back down into the depths again. He then retrieved a candle and a match from his pocket. He struck the wooden match on the wall of the cave and it flared to life. Tipping the match sideways, he lit the candle before discarding the used match. As the flame grew to its full strength, he held it high in the air and looked around. The cavern looked quite different than it had when it was flooded by the pure radiance of Sador's Shekinah stone. It now looked, well, creepy. Catching his bearings, William retrieved his backpack and carefully stepped off towards the passageway that led to the Ankara village. The strange, mournful song he had grown to a crescendo a few moments before and was now gradually fading away. Although he had no cognitive understanding of what was being expressed, William again noted the sadness and the pleading tone in the voices. "I wonder what's wrong." As he drew close to the village, the light from the pool of truth grew bright enough that he no longer needed the candle. He blew it out and returned it to his pocket after it had cooled. He then continued on. As he slowly entered the village, one set of eyes after another rose to meet his gaze, only to turn away again in anger or grief, or a strange mixture of both. "Young lord," a voice called out from his left. William turned to see Sador standing outside of one of the Ankara homes. As he looked closer, he noticed Lucinda standing just inside the door and realized that this must be the home of his friend Enid. "Hello, Sador," he replied. Then, slightly shifting his gaze to Lucinda, he asked, "Where's Enid? I brought some gifts for you guys." Lucinda's sparsely buried grief overflowed. Sobbing openly, she retreated into the house. Now both embarrassed and frightened, William pled, What's wrong? Where's Enid?" Sador stepped forward slightly as if attempting to shelter Lucinda from William's unintentional assault. "Young lord," he began, "walk with me." He motioned towards the pool of truth and began walking. William followed. As they reached the shining water's edge, Sador came to a stop, gazing into the radiant depths. The silence grew very uncomfortable for William. Sador," he cautiously began. "Young lord," Sador interrupted, "Enid, your friend, and mine, lies gravely injured. He may not live." "What?" William exploded. "What do you mean? How?" Both grief and anger overtook him at once. "Marshak." Sador winced as he bit out the name. "Marshak led a band of the Dark Ones to this village a few nights ago. Well, most of our gatherers were out collecting food. On all previous raids, it had been, for the most part, our sound stones or firestones that they were after. And so, we had several guards assigned to protect our remaining supplies. However, the Dark Ones overpowered the guards, killing 2 of them. They managed to steal most of the stones before reinforcements arrived." William's anger grew as Sador looked up at him and continued. Enid, along with the 2 others, secretly followed at a distance as the Dark Ones fled. At one point, when they assumed that they were safely away, the Dark Ones stopped to rest. Enid crept close enough to overhear their discussion. He apparently discovered the dark scheme behind these raids. William's eyes grew wide. "What?" he asked. "What's that?" Sador sighed, looking into the shining waters again. "We do not know, young lord." As Enid rose from his hiding place in order to rejoin the others and return to the village, he was spotted. One of the Dark One's arrows struck him in the arm as he fled. "In the arm?" William asked, slightly confused. "Remember, young lord," Sador began, "the Dark Ones lace their weapons with poison. However, the arrow that struck Enid was fired in haste. If the poison had been freshly applied, Enid would not be alive." He's okay then? William asked. He lies gravely wounded, Sador replied. Lucinda has done all that she can for him, but his recovery is uncertain. Choking back tears, he continued, He is delirious with fever, speaking only of the great deluge and a dark plan. The others who were with him did not know of what he speaks. He fell unconscious before he could tell them what he had overheard. But can't you just bring him here and give him some of this water of yours? William asked. The healing properties of this water, Sador began slowly, only work if it is ingested of one's conscious choice and free will. It cannot be imposed. Enid is presently too ill, too delirious, to make this choice of his own free will. William's grief and worry flashed once again into a vindictive anger. I've got a bunch of fireworks left over from the 4th of July. Find out where all those creeps hang out and I'll blow them to pieces. Shock and disgust covered Sador's face as he turned again to face William. No, do not speak of such vile things in my presence. How dare you? Somewhat taken aback, William protested. What? There is still much darkness in your own heart, Sador flatly replied. You would use an act of darkness to fight darkness? He asked pointedly. Look around you, Sador continued. As it is in the material world, so it is in the spiritual. It is light that dispels darkness. An evil act would only propagate more evil. It's not evil to defend yourself, William hotly retorted. Now somewhat enraged himself, Sador clenched his fists. After taking a moment to calm himself, he turned and spoke slowly and matter-of-factly to William. Although they have done this vile thing, he began, the Dark Ones are still our brothers. They have been deceived and taken captive by the powers of hell and the passions of the flesh, which they now serve. Remember, young lord, the dark stain of sin found its origin in your race. They are victims as much as they are villains. Although in their present state not one of them would shed a single tear over our demise, we wish them no harm. We daily pray that they may have somehow, someday, returned to the light of truth. There was a definite note of finality in Sador's voice. You should go now, he said. Our village is heavy with grief. If you wish, you may return tomorrow. We may know by then if Enid will survive. William said not another word. He turned and slowly made his way back through the village. Just as he was about to enter the long passageway leading to the outer room, he paused. Removing the gifts he had brought from his backpack, he set them down on the ground before continuing on. It seemed somewhat of a trivial act at this point, but perhaps those things would be of some use. And the end of this chapter is a poem called Vigil. I'll hold it up to pause in just a moment. A quiet spirit searches the dawn in earnest, fervent desire, probing, pleading, drawn to the sacred source as moths are drawn to fire. A tiny spark, so frail and dim, scans the sky anew, listening, longing, seeking the flame from which it flew. And that's the conclusion of chapter 19. Do I have a good picture there? Yes, I do. Be back with chapter 20 next time.